Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Legislative and Advocacy Committee of the Board of Education to order for our December 11th meeting. We have a short agenda this afternoon. The primary purpose of our meeting is to review the changes to the legislative platform, which we discussed in our last meeting. If those are approved by this committee, we will send that to the full board tomorrow. We're on the agenda tomorrow to get that introduced before the start of session, which is just weeks away. We'll also hear a quick update from Mr. Carroll, although all of you should have received his, I guess it's your first legislative update for 2024, which dealt with some of the pre-filing issues. And I know Steve has been vigilantly reading through thousands of bills that have already been filed. He said it was a record this year. And if he has any takeaways from that, I think he's still reconnecting, so I don't know if he can hear me, but I know he can work on the fly. And then finally, I did just want to check in with the subcommittees. I'm not expecting any substantive anything tremendously substantive, although I know some subcommittees have been working pretty vigorously on some great ideas, which I've seen. And that will be it. And I also, if we can, at this meeting, if people have their calendars handy, if we can try to see if we can set some meetings going forward, because after the start of the new year, there'll be a lot of things fast and furious, I imagine, that will need to be updated on at the beginning. Then it'll probably slow down, and then we'll get picked back up as we get towards the end of the session in May. So if there's any questions or any thoughts, feel free to jump in. But first, I just wanted to go over the changes to the legislative platform. Everyone should have got a link to the document that is posted on the website. There have been just a couple typo changes. There were some things that needed to be taken out. They're supposed to be replaced that were still in another document. So I'm not sure if those have made it in there yet. But I sent those on to Public Affairs to make those changes. So if you have your documents in front of you, the first change that was made was on page 1 under trauma and homelessness. Under bullet point 3, we changed the first sentence to read a new category for weighted factors for transient students, those students with a high mobility rate and or students who are classified as homeless of 25%. And shows that Steve is still connecting, but it's my understanding that bill to do just that. Are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm having trouble with the computer, so I had to call in for the
I got you.
on the top. Okay.
So I was just going to say, it's my understanding, I think a bill to do just that has already been pre-filed. Is that right?
That's correct. Senate Bill 967.
All right. So Senate Bill 967, we've already got one on the watch list, something to root for rather than root against. So that's great. Our next change to the platform is under virtual programs on page 1. We added 2 new bullet points, capping the amount paid per credit hour to the cost of what the district is paying for their in-district provider virtual education credit hours. And this is in response to changes where it's not just limited to the district that were made in previous years. It's not just limited to the district provider, but any provider, so that there's a fear or actually an expectation that there'll be new providers coming in that are really going to be profit centric, and the district would lose control over how much those costs would be. So that is one of the platform or the legislative changes that we're asking for. And then also efforts to stop virtual providers from becoming virtual charter schools statewide and from becoming their own LEA attendance centers. And again, that's something that has been floated before, just to make it clear that we would oppose that. The next change is on page 2 under local control. We added a new bullet point, legislation that gives the State Board of Education the power to make a final determination on whether to allow new charter schools to open with existing local within existing local school districts. This is in line with one of our legislative priorities, asking for more accountability and more and giving the state board more oversight into determining whether or not a charter school should open within a district. And I think that one kind of goes without saying. So the next one is on page 3. Change the heading of virtual providers to empowerment scholarship accounts. We dealt with these kind of vaguely previously in our platform. So here we have some more explicit language, since this is going to be a large push again this year to change the educational empowerment scholarships accounts into a more pure virtue or a voucher system. So the language says we're adding new bullet points on page 3. We're opposing expanding ESA programs with additional taxpayer dollars, and we're opposing changing or expanding any student eligibility for ESA programs and any statewide expansion. There are limits to those vouchers now, and we're fine with those limits. All right, so I think that's it for the platform changes. Are there any questions or comments or additions or subtractions to those? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the platform and send it to the full board. Mr. Clemens, yes.
So moved.
Oh, thank you,
Second.
sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Nolan, you have a comment, question?
Oh, I was second. I was gonna
Okay.
second.
Well, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of adopting the legislative platform as amended, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The motion carries, and this will be on the board's agenda for approval tomorrow night. Dr. Scarlett, do you have your hand raised, or were you voting quietly? Okay, thanks. All right, so our next agenda is I just wanted to go through the legislative subcommittees and our priorities. We haven't really followed up, and so if someone wants to be a spokesperson for your subcommittee and say, yes, you're working on it, no, you're not working on it, yes, you need help, just tell me where you are. So the first one is trauma support. And if I recall, that's Ms. Spies and Dr. Charles.
Tracy, okay, I'll speak for this. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Tracy and I have been working on this. We're just kind of at the point of like talking about people to be on the committee. And we wanted to have a balance of people who are in the field and working with the students who are experiencing trauma. And so we talked about having individuals who, you know, I'm a teacher at Sumner, so there is a lot of trauma at that school. And so having like a social worker, like a counselor, and then we also thought it would be a good idea to maybe have the former school principal. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did you lose me for a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then also there were some also, if anybody else has any ideas who would be a great idea for a fit for this committee, we would be open to that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I would urge you to reach out to Dr. Borachet, because I know that she's got new personnel in those departments, which would be great to include. So thank you, Dr. Charles. Next is housing insecurity. President Cousins, was that you?
You just go put that on me. I thought Miss Glory was gonna say something, but I'll take it, Miss Glory.
I can. So we are still in the planning phases of planning. Right now, I think that we are probably going to get our best start after the break to jump into our committee meetings, and then we'll move forward from there. Just kind of pinning down everybody's schedule has been a bit of a challenge, but I am here for it, and so we will proceed after the break.
Actually, and as I want to jump on to what she's saying, Vice President Davis, we are actually going to be incorporating some of what we're already working on in regards to the housing insecurities that we know we're dealing with our students. So we are bringing some representatives from students in transitions that will be a part of our committee as well. So we will be moving forward, like Ms. Gloria said, kind of we first had to identify who our team was going to be and kind of structurally trying to see what this will actually look like. But we have great things to come. So we're excited about what our committee will be working on.
Okay, well done, the dynamic duo. The next is charter school legislation, and Dr. Borshade has sent me, if not one, but two spreadsheets already with attachments and citations. So not that there was any question who the top of the class was going to be, but I just wanted to point it out. Dr. Borshade turned her homework in early and got extra credit. But Dr. Borshade, do you want to give kind of an overview of what you guys are doing on charter school legislation?
Sure. Thank you for that. So the team consists of myself, President Ray Cummings, Dr. Pollack, Miss Letitia Harvey Smith, and Dr. Smith, as well as Chief Banks. And so we asked ourselves a few questions on our committee, and some of our questions were about implementing a moratorium on new charter schools. We asked ourselves questions about how do we, I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up my notes. So we talked about the moratorium. We talked about strengthening charter oversight and accountability. Currently, we have a handbook that we use as a guide that works between charter schools and SLPS. And so we're going to work to update that. And I can share that if anyone needs to see what we currently have. We also discuss fair funding formulas, and we're going to research whether it is possible to adjust funding allocations to account for financial impact of charter schools regarding SLPS. And Chief Banks had lots of discussion and shared great things with us. Some revolutionary things. And then we are also going to be researching the notion of double dipping, in that many charter schools receive funding from public school districts and private resources. Is it possible for legislation to prevent charter schools from accessing public funds if they are also receiving significant private funds? We had lots of healthy, robust conversation on that. And then, is it possible regarding attendance with what is possible regarding attendance with the charter school? For example, if we are diverting funds from St. Louis Public for a student who is attending charter, but it is determined that the student is not attending due to lack of attendance, what happens to that money? Where does it go? Do they verify attendance? And so we raised the question, as we know, many districts are missing students that they cannot account for. So who gets the funds for those students? And then we had an opportunity. One of the other things that we have just discovered is that with charter schools, there are assurances that this charter school has to verify. It is a very, very tedious and lengthy process, and that takes away from the time and resource and manpower that we have here in SLPS. And so we just want to understand from DESE what that needs to look like in terms of verification. I think that's just a high-level overview. We're going to continue meeting to find some specific answers to the questions about double dipping, the questions about attendance. We had an opportunity where there was a student who was suspended from our charter school, and the parent came back to SLPS saying that the student was told that they could not come back to that school. That's what the principal told them. But in reaching out to the CEO work with her principal to get them back into the school. And so if there are situations where that is not happening, and students are being sent back, just want to understand the fairness that represents. And we are not sharing resources in terms of transportation with our charter schools. We are not sharing recruiting time with our charter schools. We're not doing any of those things. I think that's a high level overview of what we're doing in our community.
Just wanted to also share that Lou Kruger created a map. I asked him to create a map so we can see the spread of where the charter schools are. So you can see in the north, there's like nothing, this big, thick sort of concentration right here, and then south. And so it was just nice to have a visual. I'd never seen a visual about when we're saying that we don't need charter schools in certain areas. I didn't know what the areas were. So I thought this was a great tool for all of us to have. And so I can see if it can be sent out electronically to the real estate group, or if you all want them printed, you know what I mean? I can get them printed for you.
The other thing I'd like to add is that when you go and look up schools in St. Louis Public Schools, the charter schools come up under that. And so parents are oftentimes believing that their children are going to St. Louis Public Schools when in fact they are going to charter schools because of the way it is listed. And so that's something that we need to just be really, really clear about. And yeah.
That was excellent. I told you she got an A and extra credit.
That was my committee, me and my committee.
I don't know who all had an opportunity to listen to any parts of the state board meeting on December 5th, but I am going to send out a link with a timestamp at the part where they were talking about charter schools, and particularly St. Louis Public Schools and the citywide plan. It was a fascinating discussion, and so I think everybody should listen to that on this committee in particular as well. And you know, we'll have further things I think that we'll need to work on, but having that discussion in mind will be helpful, I think. All right, so fourth and especially not least, special education funding. So who wants to take that one on? Dr. Berry, Dr. Banks, Ms. Banks?
Dr. Crapo, are you going to jump in, or Ms. Banks, Chief Banks?
Sure, I can start, and then Chief Banks, you want to just kind of add if I miss anything. So our group came together last week. It included Byron Clemens, Chief Banks, Dr. Berry, and we also invited our Director of Special Education, Candace Boyd, to our subcommittee. And what we really talked about, I think, two things. One is the need, when we think about a special education tax, is to communicate with the public around all the services that we provide our students. When we think about the wraparound supports that our students get, I don't think that everyone in the community is familiar with that. Particularly, you know, we just talked about charter schools, and we think about kind of the level of support that SLPS provides in comparison with charters, but just in general, there are a whole host of things that we do that I don't think the community is aware of. So one is just making sure that's clear. And I think the second piece that we started talking about is really diving into our data and doing a root cause analysis around, you know, if we receive more special education funding, what are our key needs for that? How are we going to be spending that money? So we know we talked, part of that was around salaries, but there are whole other kind of areas of resources that our special education department and our schools need support with. And so talking with Ms. Boyd about, you know, working with her to develop a plan around where those key needs are and how that funding would support that. Chief Banks.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing I would add is, you know, I know everyone talked about a tax rate. You know, there's certainly, I don't think anything in the legislature that says we could have a second tax levy. So I kind of did a dive into SSD and how that's structured out in the county. SSD is its own school district. That's why it has a levy. So certainly, if we had another St. Louis Public Schools, we could have a separate levy, but with our current levy, we have been taking voluntary deductions. I think this is the third year in a row. So we certainly have room within our current levy if we wanted to carve out some space for special education specifically. I think we can do that. And like Dr. Crapo said, I think it's really about the plan for exactly what we want to do and kind of like what those costs might be. Because certainly our levy is dependent on assessed valuations from year to year. So, things can change. So we would have to be very strategic in how we structure anything within our current levy.
Mr. Clements here. I just wanted to add one thing. The per pupil expenditure for the St. Louis County Special School District is $139,000 per year. St. Louis Public Schools is roughly $18,000 per year. We're spending money on special education and vocational and tech. If we had this other funding stream and could let the public know exactly where the monies are going and do a good PR and marketing thing, people would recognize it and once again support the district like they continue to.
Yeah, and a great example of that, Dr. Crapo and I spent a little over an hour this morning and mainly with the social worker at Griscom. And in St. Louis County, the special school district handles education at their juvenile facility, whereas here we sort of treat it like any other school, and it's certainly not like any other school. And so that's just one example. We could go down the list and probably come up with 100. But that's something where that is not something that any individual school district is responsible for. That is part of the special school district and that special levy. I'm certain that they probably are utilizing the resources differently than we are to more effect, and we probably have a greater need here in the city. So that's just one example, but that's great. I'm so excited about that. And Chief Banks, I think that's brilliant, and I want to learn more about that. And it also is easier than the other options we were talking about. And I think just to get something started, maybe down the line, if there's another solution to funding, but to get something started once we've got that structure in place, I think would make it easier. So good work. All right. Anyone else want to chime in about subcommittees or work that you're doing? If not, Mr. Carroll, I'll give you 2 minutes. Could you summarize all of the bills that have been filed and you read in 2 minutes, please?
Well, I'll certainly try in 2 minutes, Mr. Vice President. All I can say is that starts in about 3.5 weeks. Put your seatbelt on and strap in and get ready because it's going to be a interesting, tough session again. We're already tracking well over 100 bills that have been pre-filed just since December 1. There's been approximately 1,200 total bills already pre-filed, which is a state record. So I think you can tell it's an upcoming election year. All the legislators are trying to play to their base, putting in lots of legislation, even though I think with such an election year as it's going to be, I'm not sure a lot of this stuff's going to get across the finish line. However, as we stated earlier, we do have one of our bills in, Senate Bill 967 by Steve Roberts for the homelessness in the foundation formula. He also put in Senate Bill 885, which is the school board vacancy, allowing the school board to do it instead of the mayor. Some of the other legislation that has been filed that certainly we're going to be tracking and following, testifying for or against. The open enrollment issue is going to be front and center again. It is House Bill 1757, sponsored by Representative Pollack, and then in the Senate, it is Senate Bill 1051, sponsored by Senator Trent. Although Senate Bill 1051 has the St. Louis Public Schools carved out. So we'll certainly be fighting to keep that language in there should that bill be moving. You also have some other legislation, obviously, statewide charter school expansion. You've got Senate Bill 1123 And then you've got one that's carved down a little bit. It's House Bill 1485 that just allows for charter schools in St. Louis County and St. Charles County. And you have some ESA expansion bills, obviously, that we'd be opposed to, House Bill 1615 and Senate Bill 727. And here we go again, Senate Bill 770, which is the 619 project in critical race theory and the Parents' Bill of Rights. So be dealing with that issue again this year. On a couple things, though, that we would be, I believe, supportive of, Senate Bill 959 by Senator Beck, which states that no statewide funding will go to any charter school that uses a charter management company. So I think that will put some halt on some of these charter schools using these for-profit management companies. In addition, Senate Bill 1080, which would expand the foundation formula to include 3- and 4-year-olds, which would be big. On a couple issues as far as the budget, DESE has put forth their budget, has sent it to the governor. We just saw it today. It does include our $2.5 million for our reading literacy program, and it also includes full funding of the transportation formula. So very happy to see that's in DESE's request. Now it goes to the governor, and the governor will decide whether he will put that as part of his request or not to the General Assembly. But we're certainly going to be fighting for both of those, as that's some good dollars coming to the St. Louis Public Schools that we feel we should be getting. So with that, I'll just stop right there, Mr. Davis, and be happy to try to answer any questions, but that's kind of the quick 2-minute synopsis.
Any questions for Mr. Carroll? Kind of like history repeating itself, but
I do. I had a question. Just going back
It's
to it's Groundhog Day. I agree.
Day.
I agree. I do believe I've heard this all before. I just wanted to see if you could say a little bit more about Senate Bill 959. Speaking about the charter schools and the charter management companies that receive profit. I know that there's the nonprofit and for-profit agencies that serve as the foundation for the new charter schools, but many of the nonprofits do receive funding. Would they be included in this bill?
The actual language of the bill is not online yet. It was just a summary. And the way the summary states, it would be all charter management companies regardless. But until I could actually see, so all that's up on the Senate website is just the summary. So until I get the whole wording in front of me, I can't really answer that.
Thank you so much for that. And just for clarification, I was bringing that up because of our local sponsor in the city of St. Louis, Opportunity Trust, continues to work that process and receive. I know they receive some type of kickback for opening new schools, and so I wanted to see if they were included in that language. I'll wait to hear a response later on that. Thanks.
I'll be happy to let you know as soon as we can find out something.
And this is Dr. Borche. Did I miss, can you say, in terms of Senate Bill 1080, did you say what the funding formula would be?
It would include basically all pre-K, 100% would be run through the formula. All 3- and 4-year-olds.
All right.
Is there another
That's
school
wonderful.
district in Missouri? I'm sorry, Byron, go ahead.
No, that's wonderful news. We took that leap of faith with the DSEG movie and expanded pre-K to 3- and 4-year-olds. And I think it's one of the best things St. Louis Public School has done. That getting funding for it would be useful.
Is there another district in the state of Missouri that does P3?
Say that again.
Is there another district in the state of Missouri that does P3? Does anybody know?
Well, I mean,
I
all
thought we were the
school
only one.
districts- That,
could be
that's not
wrong, but-
correct. Yeah, a certain amount of percentage of the kids can qualify for pre-K in all school districts through the form. But this would make it 100%.
So that expands it into other areas of the state.
Well, yeah, every school district that participates, well, all school districts participate in the foundation formula, so it would affect all school districts.
Does this include child find?
That I don't know.
I would I would be curious, Chief Banks, if you could maybe run some numbers on that just for our own edification. So if if it's possible, but my what I wonder is because we receive less money from the state, if money going for pre-K through the formula is going to mean less to us since we're already funding it, I guess now mostly all through our own operating budget. Because that money then will also be available for charter school pre-K expansion as well. And after 1552, they'll receive more money from state aid than we do.
Right, and certainly, unless they're going to increase how they're funding the formula, if they're going to add more money to accommodate more students, then that's ultimately going to mean fewer funds for St. Louis.
This bill is being sponsored by Senator Arthur of the Kansas City area, who's a Democrat. And I believe she's probably just putting this bill out there now so that it be a discussion point to incorporate it in a new foundation formula that I think will be acted within the next 2 or 3 years. I don't really think Senate Bill 1080 has a high chance of passing this year. I think really she put it in as a talking point because we're really going to start to get into some heavy discussions on a new formula. That's just my gut feeling.
All right, well, we will have lots of time to talk more about these things, particularly as they become more concrete. Dr. Scarlett, yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, Chair Davis. I have a question. I know we're focusing on the open enrollment for the one bill, and I always want to make sure we are aware, Steve, there could be some potential other bills that open enrollment may be attached to. Is that safe to say?
Oh, absolutely. There'll always be a big omnibus education bill that have charter school expansion and virtual and open enrollment, everything put in it, kind of like last year when there was a 197-page bill that had everything in it but the kitchen sink. So yes, other bills certainly get attached to it.
So we just got to keep our eyes on those and see where they are through the House before they get to the Senate. Is that safe to say as well?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the enrollment in the House only passed by 4 votes last year, so it was very close. There is a chance that we can kill it again in the House this year. I think a couple of the folks that voted for it last year probably did so at the Speaker's urging because he's a big proponent. But right now, the Speaker's got problems, and I don't think that the force behind the throne, so to speak, may not be there this year. Obviously, we've been able to stop it every year in the Senate. We've been able to keep it from coming to a vote. And I imagine that's where the play will probably come down again this year. But we would love to just kill it outright in the House for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else for Mr. Carroll, I did want to ask one thing. Tracy or Gloria, is there a date set for the Parent Action Council Day?
Yes, we came off mute, I think, at the same time, February the 20th, and I believe that is a Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. bright and early, 6 o'clock departure.
Will that work, Steve?
We'll make it work.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so mark your calendars, and then while you have your calendars out, I did want to talk about our next meeting. Does this work, 4 o'clock on the Monday prior to a board meeting? So that would put us on January 8th.
Yes.
Anyone is this a bad time for anybody? Any worse than any other time, I guess? All right, thumbs
Well,
down. for
On
Ms. Banks.
Monday,
Because sorry, Steve?
I will try to make that work, but on Monday, session starts at 4 p.m.
Okay.
on Monday.
Angie gave a thumbs
But
up
if
to
I-
you, real estate committee, is that right?
I'm out of the country, but I'll be back, I think, on the 14th of January.
Okay.
But
Well, what
she's
if we-
right, though. She's right, Vice President Davis. Our real estate meetings are from 3 to 4.
What if we did Tuesday, the week after a board meeting? So that would put us on January 16th. January 15th is holiday.
Yeah,
At 4 o'clock by Zoom?
that works for us. For me, I'm
Steve-
sorry.
Yeah, and Steve, if you're busy, I mean, we'll always understand.
No, I think I can make that one work.
Okay. All right, so our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 16th at 4 o'clock by Zoom. All right, anything
Okay.
else anyone wants to discuss or has questions about? All right.
Happy
well,
holidays, everybody.
Yes, happy holidays. Travel safely if you're traveling safely, and I'll see most of you tomorrow. So